Okay, thank you very much. Okay, everyone, good morning, and thank you for attending our presentation. I just want to start with a quick note. When we first applied to this conference many months ago, we were going to go through quite a few activities that we do in our online classes. However, due to Corona, I think a lot of us are now teaching online, and we don't really want to introduce anything like too basic or redundant. So what we're going to do is we're just going to focus on just a few of the activities that we do in these online classes, and particularly look at the student perceptions of these activities. Okay, so this is a brief outline of what we're going to talk about today. And as I say, we're just going to focus on a few of these activities and think about them from a pedagogical perspective, and then look at student perceptions. Okay, so to give you some background to our situation, we are both working in the Language Center teaching English at Tampere University, which is in Finland. The university, the Language Center operates on 2 campuses of the university, and the courses are offered in a mixture of mediums, including face-to-face classes, well, they were before, blended learning and online learning as well. In particular, the university is very interested in increasing the number of online courses available in order to offer more opportunities for student learning. And just as an example of the popularity of these online courses, my own classes, I have one that runs as a face-to-face and an online version. There are 22 places in the course. My face-to-face class got about 35 applicants, and my online course got about 140 applicants. So the online courses are very much getting more popular. Okay, and one of the topics of this talk today is looking at activities that are done within the online courses that particularly focus on increasing the pedagogy as opposed to just relying on the technology. Okay, so move on. Yeah, all of them. Sorry, Darrell's doing the slides for me. So the courses that we offer online, I've been teaching them for about a year now. And this talk today came out of some observations that we both have found, in that some of the online teaching was lacking from both the student's point of view and also our point of view. So these are issues that we really wanted to tackle, and therefore increase the learning opportunities and make the courses generally run better. These are some of the comments as to why we've had to develop these activities. And in particular, I'd like to point out the student comments, the lack of opportunities for communication. This was a huge thing in some of the earlier courses that I was running. They were entirely online, and the students were feeling like a lack of classroom community and a lack of communication between the students. So, which for a language course is particularly, yeah, we're not really looking for that. And in terms of the teacher comments, the online courses in some ways were very intensive in terms of administration as opposed to the teaching. And we thought that that was an area that could be improved upon, and in particular things like feedback in the online context. Okay, so today we're going to focus on 4 main activities that we use in our online courses. These include student meetings, which are performed online in Zoom and things like that, peer review or student-to-student feedback on assignments done online, teacher feedback on assignments, and also presentations. So we will look at these 4 areas in particular. Okay, over to Darrell.
Okay, thank you, Natalie. So I'll very briefly introduce our research methods for this presentation. This was very much an action research project because our goal was to improve our teaching and improve our offerings for the students, and hopefully lead to better course implementation and learning outcomes. The research sample came from about 130 students. It was a very much a convenient sample because it was just students that Nat and I were teaching. There was around 130 plus participants, mostly Finnish, but a few international students from the postgraduate courses especially. We took the sample from 5 actual courses, but with 8 groups. There was 2 Introduction to Academic English courses, which were online courses that Natalie was running. There was a Professional Interactions in English courses that I was running, and they started off as blended courses, but then moved to online after the COVID situation. And then there was 2 Academic Writing in English summer courses that were offered online. And then there was a thesis writing and a research presentations course that were offered blended learning, but then had to move to fully online in reaction to the COVID situation. And we collected this data over 1 academic year over a number of semesters. And the data collection methods largely were surveys, but we also backed up surveys with informal, semi-structured interviews and some follow-up questions by email to gather a little bit more detail and data. Now, we haven't got the time or the space here to go into great detail about the qualitative data, so we're presenting it more numerically. Okay, so now we'll move on to evaluating the activities, describing them a little bit and focusing mostly on the perceived benefits and the students' perceptions of these activities based on our data collection. Okay, so the first activity is a student-led online meeting to discuss course content or module content and ultimately learning outcomes. Again, there's nothing overly innovative here. I think a lot of people are doing this, which is why we're focusing on students' perceptions. So basically here, students formed groups independently using Moodle. Once they were in the groups, they organized meetings and assigned roles if needed, for example, host, note taker, questioner, and time manager, for example. And then during the meetings, which were normally recorded and submitted later as part of the assessment, the students discussed course content, any activities carried out, quizzes taken, for example, and they also discussed the main points and learning outcomes of each of the modules. And also they could highlight any problems they had. So if there's anything they didn't understand, anything that they were confused about or felt they needed more information. And then if necessary, students were able to collaboratively write a summary or an outline or another form of text which demonstrates their interaction and learning outcomes with the materials on the course. We thought about these activities from a number of viewpoints or perceived benefits. The first one, we were looking for a way to increase engagement with the materials and therefore increase content knowledge. As Natalie said, there was a little bit of a problem with some of the online components of blended courses or online courses. Students didn't feel they were interacting with the materials so much. It was a little bit passive. Therefore, we thought holding these kind of meetings would increase student interaction, give them opportunity to use the target language more. And in this case, these were English courses or English medium courses. And it offered like language skills integration. So it would increase the necessary to read the materials, talk about the materials, listen to other people's opinions about the materials, possibly make notes and summarize. So it basically gave more language input, language output, interaction. Obviously, it taught a little bit of softer skills or helped students develop things like scheduling skills, hosting meetings, sharing screens, using technology to collaborate, write projects. And most importantly possibly was to help create a community feel, give students the opportunity to interact with other students, which was something that was lacking, especially in the online courses. And in terms of the survey and interview feedback, the perceptions were generally positive. 80% of students rated the activities as useful, effective, or very useful and effective, based on a 5-point Likert scale question item, and then also interview data after that. 70% of the students thought that these kind of activities should be a required part of the course, as they were for us. They said as much as they thought they were useful, they enjoyed them, and it was beneficial. If it was just an optional activity, they probably wouldn't do it just because of their own time constraints or somewhat laziness. So they did think it was beneficial to have them as required. They also preferred these kind of activities in terms of showing their learning outcomes, as opposed to being tested on the course content or just individually writing summaries or outlines. And a lot of the students mentioned in the interviews that they did think it increased their engagement with materials. They had to read things more and maybe more deeply to make sure they had a good understanding before they went forward with the group meeting. And pretty much unanimously, students enjoyed the opportunity to meet and talk to other students. Okay, the second activity, which is also online meetings, is very similar to this one. This was just more specifically focused on meetings to talk about academic texts that students had read, or academic summaries they'd written, or also sort of synthesizing research from different angles and creating a group research grid that would be used in academic text construction later on. So again, they formed groups, organized groups, and then compared their ideas, compared their texts, and then quite often they collaboratively wrote a summary or construct a research grid, which would then be used in their academic writing later on in the course. Again, the same sort of perceived benefits overall: increased engagement, interaction, target language use, IT skills, community feel. But we also thought this might build confidence and reduce anxiety, because students are reading quite complex academic texts in a second language. So by being able to read something, talk about it, share their opinions, ask and answer questions, we felt it might increase the learning outcomes and build confidence before they then have to use these texts later on. Again, the perceptions were very positive. 75% of the students rated the activities as very effective or useful. They also felt that it did increase interaction and understanding of difficult text. I think by reading it and then explaining it to other students, summarizing it and dealing with it, it said they got a sort of greater understanding, built confidence, and again, it was enjoyable. And the students also felt that this kind of pre-meetings led well into the peer review stage that followed next. Okay, the next thing I'd like to talk about is using peer review. We're not going to talk about the principles or advantages of peer review. I think that's fairly well stated. We're just going to talk about the way we use the technology to facilitate our peer review process. And essentially what this involved was giving students choice of the medium or the mode of peer review. So the first option was a more traditional paper-based or text-based peer review process where students share their text, they read the text, and they make comments using the track changes or the comment functions of Microsoft Word or PDF software. The second option was students could record their feedback using something like Screencast-O-Matic or something like this, where they could read the text first, think about it, and then record verbal notes and submit that to their peer review partners. And the third choice that we gave them was to hold an online meeting via Zoom or Microsoft Teams, where they discuss each other's essays or papers and give each other feedback via the meeting format. We thought that giving this choice would maybe cater to different learning styles or preferences, increase learner autonomy, and for those who chose the online meeting forum, to give them more chance for discussion, negotiation, and use of the target language. Overall, the offering the students choice was very positive. Students liked being given the choice. However, most of the students chose the more traditional written version just because it was easier or less time consuming. However, those who chose the meeting said it was quite effective and it gives chance to discuss other tasks. And we asked the students who did each different mode to assess them in terms of their effectiveness. And the meeting format and the recorded version was rated most highly by those who did it. So the traditional written version received a score of 3.4 on a 5-point scale. The recorded style was 4.2 and the online meetings was 4.6. So although most people chose the written form, that was probably viewed least effectively compared to the other two. Okay, now Natalie will move on.
Okay, so I'll just explain very briefly the next two activities because I know we're getting a bit short on time here. So I'll talk here about feedback on written work. This is for teacher feedback. One of the things that was an issue with the feedback in the online courses was at first it was mainly written feedback using things like track changes in Microsoft Word. The problem that we found with this kind of feedback was the students would only correct the things that were pointed out in the track changes and didn't look at the essay as a whole. Whereas the new system that we used, using Screencast-O-Matic or some kind of similar technology which can record both the screen and your voice at the same time. This allowed the teacher to be able to talk directly to the student and discuss the essay. And we found that this resulted in a much stronger essay from the students because they could think more about it. One of the things that we noticed was the difference between face-to-face classes and online classes was the written work tended to be a lot weaker in the online classes. So having this teacher input and teacher communication and interaction really did help their work. Overall, students thought it was a really good system. We had excellent results through both the surveys and also the students volunteering comments, writing to us saying this is such a good way of giving feedback. Obviously, they got the opportunity to correct their essays, and it being a video, they could rewatch parts and really get to understand what was needed. And also there was a personal aspect to it as well. With the online classes, it can be a little bit lonely and they're lacking that classroom community. So by having this interaction with the teacher, it really helped them. Okay, and the last one is presentations, which we offered in 2 different formats for the students. One of them was live online presentations, very much like we're doing here today, using Zoom. These were either with the teacher or without the teacher, depending on the course that was offered. If it was without the teacher, then the students organized it themselves and recorded it. If it was with the teacher, then the teacher did the organizing and led it as a sort of mini conference. The problem we had was there are some students who feel very nervous about presenting online, whether it's due to the technology or due to just nerves of being recorded. So we offered an alternative for these students in which they could pre-record their presentations and then upload the recording to things like Moodle to share with the rest of the class. And we found that having these options really did help the students. It gave them their own choice on what they wanted to do, and they were able to feel less pressure doing their presentations. Of course, they still feel nervous doing the live presentations, but of course that's part of doing presentations, who doesn't? But for the students that really found it difficult, they had this other option as well. Okay, back to Darrell.
Thank you, Natalie. Okay, so we'll finish up our presentation now with a few basic conclusions. We don't have much detail here or time to go through it in great detail. But basically, I'll go through these point by point. So we found that using the online meetings is especially beneficial for online courses or blended courses with a fairly heavy online component. We found it was useful for increasing engagement, interaction, and repetition with online materials. However, some students did rightly comment, I think, that the time it required to form groups, organize groups, hold the meetings, submit the recordings, etc., might outweigh the learning outcomes of a particular module. So in terms of time, cost benefit, some students thought that it wasn't necessarily the most effective use of their time. But overall, as the survey and interview results said, most students thought it was a useful activity, should be included in the course. In terms of the peer review format, the flexibility in offering the format proved popular, but as I said, most students make their choice based on what is easiest or quickest rather than what seems to be most effective. In terms of using things like Screencast-O-Matic to offer this kind of combination of written and verbal feedback, it was very much appreciated by students. Students really very much liked this kind of verbal format, as Natalie mentioned. However, we were using Screencast-O-Matic and we were using the free version, which has a 15-minute limit. And therefore, sometimes for longer texts, it had to do 2 recordings, and it was quite time consuming to save those recordings, convert them, and then send them to the student. We're thinking now it's probably better for longer text like thesis and stuff that we might actually do the same format but using a Zoom meeting instead, where I'll hold a Zoom meeting, I share the screen and just record the feedback that way. In terms of the presentation, the sort of autonomous choice of presentation, that again seemed very popular, but one one of the issues we need to think about equalizing time and effort, because obviously it takes a lot longer to organize a mini conference, take part in a conference as an audience member with 4 or 5 other speakers than it does just to record one presentation and submit it. So there's some kind of issues that need to be dealt with there. Okay, thank you for that. We're sorry we had to rush it a little bit, but if you have any questions, we're happy to take questions now. And if you want any more information or examples of anything, you can contact the email address. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. It was really great. I've got some comments on like the stream from Tony Corbalis, like so interesting. Thank you. Love the idea of screencast-matic. Thank you and well others. So I think people really enjoy that, not only here in Brno but also online. How about questions? Do you have any questions? We've got like follow-up presentation, of course, but maybe one question would be possible. Anybody would like to? I had a quick question. I hope you can hear me. Can you?
Yep.
Good, great. I have the feeling that at the University of Tampere, you are all teachers are very technically savvy, and you have sort of expected the COVID situation or something because you have been like prepared in advance, or is it like just my impression, or everybody is like into this like online teaching? And have you had some special courses for Tampere University teachers that everybody was like so familiar with the technology?
You want me to answer that, Natalie? Or?
Yep.
No, the university, as Natalie mentioned, has for a while now been focusing on trying to offer as many of the courses online, face-to-face and blended. So some of the teachers had already been involved in it, like myself and Natalie. We'd been involved in using Zoom in some of our courses before the COVID. So that definitely did help. But we had other teachers that had a pretty much 90 or 95% course load, which was face-to-face. And those teachers weren't necessarily that sort of well equipped or well versed in the online technologies. But previously to the COVID breakout, we had been doing teacher-led and team-led online trainings for each other. So we kind of posted forums about what technology issues we had. I had never used Moodle until a year ago,
Okay.
and my colleagues taught me how to use that. And then because I had the necessity and Natalie had the necessity to use Zoom in some of our previous courses, we were able to teach a few basics to some of our teachers. So I think overall we had a fairly unofficial but fairly well supported network within ourselves, but also the university did really act very quickly and gave us a lot of training materials available university-wide, not just the language center, I think.
Great. I really envy you. That's great. I really enjoyed the time, but I was sort of like, like learning through the process, but I think we all have gone through something very similar. I hope, and I'm really waiting for publication of your article in the conference proceedings, because it would be great to read that once again. So thank you very much for your great input into this conference, and enjoy Finland. Hope the weather is like Indian summer, like in Brno now.
Thank you very much. Have a great day, and thank you for organizing.
Thank you. Goodbye for being with us.
Thank you.